15. The illusion of peace shattered. Old Iason lived in a constant state of high concern. Malik was nearby, no doubt plotting something more heinous. As ever, old Iason did not fear for himself so much as he did Lila and the others. However, as Achilles had said, they would not leave him of their own free will, and he had no idea how to make them change their minds. Noticing his darkening mood, Master Ethan pulled him aside after dinner the next evening. "You are not yourself. Does something ail you?" "There's nothing." The dark eyes burned into his own. "Yes, I think there is, but you do not wish to talk now." Ethan frowned. "The other night, I offered what additional help I could to you. I think this is just such a situation. Perhaps if we met alone when the others slept, I could very at least pass on some advice." Since the death of his parents, old Dyson had more or less relied on his own advice over the years, only now and then turning to the likes of Cyrus and other friends of his father. Still, the merchant had seen much and lived through more, and surely had a view of matters far exceeding that of the farmer. Old Iason finally nodded gratefully to his host. "Thank you. I'd like that." "Later, then," murmured Master Ethan. "Say the hour before midnight." Nodding again, old Dyson returned to the company of Lila and the others. It was all he could do, from that point on, to hide his impatience. The minutes took hours to pass, the hours an eternity. When at last he excused himself from Lila, the noble woman becoming used to his late-night walks, old Dyson almost ran through the house. So eager was he to reach the study and pour out his concerns. On his way, he nearly collided with a smaller figure. Cedric looked up at him, the youth's face oddly pale. "Ced, what do you still do up?" The boy glanced past, as if impatient to be away from the man before him. "Father, my father wanted to see me. No, I'm going to bed." Already feeling late for his own meeting with Master Ethan, old Dyson patted the merchant's son on the shoulder. "Of course, off you go then." Without waiting for a reply from the boy, he continued on. The halls were dimly lit, only a few oil lamps marking the night time. Old Dyson passed no guards, the merchant obviously feeling very secure in his own domain. That would have certainly changed once he heard what his guest had to say. The door to the study was closed, and no light shone through the bottom. Old Dyson looked around the empty hall, then knocked once. From within, Ethan's voice bid him enter. Relieved, old Dyson slipped inside, quickly shutting the door after him. The only illumination in the room came from a single candle situated atop a small mahogany table to the side. Next to the candle sat a decanter of wine and two goblets, one of which old Dyson's host, seated in a leather chair next to the table, took up, even as the farmer's eyes adjusted to the gloom. "Tonight, I find the quiet of the night much more relaxing," explained Master Ethan after a sip of wine. "The better to think, also." Old Dyson slipped into another chair that Master Ethan indicated. "Thank you for seeing me." "How could I not? After all that has happened, old Dyson, I could not refuse this moment to you." He gestured at the other goblet. "Please, I would recommend it." Although he wanted to keep a clear head, old Dyson suddenly felt parched. He allowed Master Ethan to pour him some wine. The liquid flowed like delicious fire down his throat. A strong vintage, but one that touches the soul, I say. Ethon put down his own goblet. You are very troubled, my son. Clutching his wine in both hands, old Dyson leaned forward and explained his concerns for his friends and Partha itself. The older men listened quietly, nodding now and then in understanding. When old Dyson had finished, Master Ethon rubbed his chin and thought. The flickering candlelight danced in his eyes, catching the farmer's attention. Your fears for my people and your own comrades does you justice, old Dyson. I would hope to do no less myself in your situation. But what can I do to keep them, all of you, from harm? I don't know if I can protect everyone. Not from the might of the Triune. I thought I could once, but after the other night. The leader of Partha rose and began to pace slowly in front of old Dyson. His mind was visibly at work. Yes, the other night, as you described it, shows an inconsistency in your gift I would have not have expected. It was a telling moment. Ethon paused, looking down at him. You may be correct. What you wield might not be enough against such a force as the Temple. Their tools are legion. I have heard through trusted sources that they have fanatic warriors who make the Peace Warders seem pacifists. Some claim that these dark-armored fighters cannot even be slain by mortal means. His description struck home with old Dyson. Yes, the attacker in the street. As I said, Achilles should have slain him with that bolt, but it only startled him. The older man stepped from the vicinity of the candlelight, all but disappearing in the shadows of the far corner of the room. So, the stories have merit. It almost makes me suggest... But no, you would never do that. What? Old Dyson was willing to try almost anything, if it would at least protect the women, the people he loved. Tell me. Master Ethon turned to face him again. If not for the fire of the candle reflecting yet again in his eyes, old Dyson would not have been able to read anything in his expression. In that gaze, though, he saw determination, and that strengthened his own resolve. There is but one way to protect them, and my beloved Partha, but I feel much guilt even suggesting it. Please, I won't hold anything against you, Master Ethon. You've been nothing but a good friend and host. Very well. It may be, my young old Dyson, that you can only accomplish what you wish by leaving them without any notice. Leave them in the dead of night and ride out of Partha, as if the hounds of the temple are nearly upon the town. Ride out and meet with this Malik. Old Dyson leapt to his feet, the goblet dropping and the chair falling backward. What? Hear me out. Malik came for you. He wants only you. What is the outcome of your encounter with him? By abandoning Partha and the others, you will remove them from the situation entirely. The Trian will trouble them no longer. The terrible thing was, what he said had not gone unconsidered by old Ison already. Yet to hear it said so bluntly put a solid weight to it that pressed down hard on his heart. But it would keep them all safe, especially Lila. Still, there was something else to think about. With the High Priest's minions already in Partha, it may be too late to undo that. They watch for you. They will surely see you leave, even if you choose to do so this very minute. Such creatures will immediately follow their prey. Or does that not make sense? To old Dyson, it made dreadfully perfect sense. And yet there was that about Master Ethan's suggestion that did not sit right with him. It's the only way, his mind insisted. The merchant stood silent, letting old Dyson battle this out himself. Leaving the others behind was the only true course of action. This was strictly between he and Malik. They would all follow me, you think? The creatures, the High Priest, I mean? I would guarantee it. To do anything to the contrary would be absurd. I finally settled it for old Dyson. I've got to do it then. His host bowed in acknowledgement of the heaviness of his decision. I will assist you to the best of my ability, in any way I can. Ethan reached out a hand. Old Dyson instinctively did the same. But just before the two men could shake, a sense of urgency overtook the son of Demeet. He pulled his hand back and stared into the merchant's eyes. There was something wrong about them. He tore his gaze from the merchant's, suddenly needing to look toward the ceiling. It was too late. From the darkness above, a heavy armored form fell upon the farmer. It brought him back to the floor, their combined weight cracking the boards beneath him. There is ever something that causes the best plans to somehow go awry, snapped a voice that was not the merchant's. I begin to wonder if it has to do with your curious and unpredictable abilities. Even as old Dyson struggled against his opponent, he recognized a new voice. It was Malik speaking. Malik in the guise of Master Ethan. Also very simple. Or it was supposed to be. Lure you out into the wild, where you could be handled without further complications. But as with last time, nothing can go simple where you are involved, farmer, can it? Old Dyson gasped. Where is Ethan? Why, right here, replied a voice that was now both Malik's and the merchant's. Let me see him, the clerk ordered old Dyson's guard. From behind, a thick hand grabbed the captive by his hair and pulled hard, forcing him to look up. The image of the merchant still stood before old Dyson. Right here, in the flesh, Ethan said, once more using the high priest's voice. The figure chuckled, then it added, or at least wearing his flesh. He reached up and touched his cheek with the palm of his right hand. Where the hand came in contact with the face, The skin there suddenly dripped as if melting. In large portions, it started sliding down his chin, where it hung in gobbets. Old Dyson's stomach turned. He struggled to free himself, but the monstrous warrior had him in a tight grip. Through the macabre display, the high priest's own dark countenance began to peek out. Malik pulled his hand away, which caused the horror melting to cease. He showed old Dyson his palm. Revealed there was a sight more terrible than the face, for it was no human hand that Malik had, but rather something that matched his demonic heart well. The high priest flexed what passed for fingers, and it amazed old Dyson that he had not noticed the misshapen appendage despite the disguise. A simple use of misdirection and illusion, explained Malik, reading his expression or his thoughts. He thrust the limb closer. Granted me by my master to assist in this hunt. I tested it twice before the merchant, whom the Morlu caught as he was returning to his home. He was an opportunity that I could not pass up. Old Dyson spat at the man. Unfortunately, coming up short with his effort, his guard, a Morlu, the high priest had called him, rewarded the captain's attempt by slamming old Dyson's face in the floor again. That will be enough, Malik commanded, whether to his prisoner or the guard. It was impossible to say. Raise the fool up. Another pair of powerful hands took hold of old Dyson's right arm. The original Morlu shifted to the left. The two armored giants held old Dyson in vice-like grips. Not as I originally intended, but this will do. The door opened. Glancing there, old Dyson saw in horror that Cedric had returned. "Go!" he shouted at the youth. "Run!" But instead of obeying, or at least looking fearful, Cedric ignored the warning. To Malik he said, "The woman's not in the room." The blood drained from old Dyson. The voice emerging from Ethan's son was no more that of the boy than Malik's had been the merchant's. "No," he gasped. "No!" "She must be there," insisted the clerk. "I sense her there even now." The arm, too, verifies that. It is drawn to her as the master said. You looked in the wrong room. Cedric shook his head. With a dismissive shrug toward the gaping old Dyson, he grunted. "This one scent is all over the room. And the bed, nothing of her. No smell, no trace." Malik reconsidered. "I see. This is a wily prey. Certainly more so than this buffoon." Old Dyson could not make sense of everything the pair said, but one bright point stuck out. Malik had sent this abomination. Tears streaked down old Dyson's face as he thought of what had happened to the lad. To hunt for Lila? That, thankfully, had so far ended in failure. "Find her quickly, Damos," the high priest continued. "You will leave nowhere untouched. The spell I cast will continue to muffle any sounds within the house only. Recall that at all times." "And we'll hunt her down, Great One. And she will not live long after that." The false Cedric assented his dire statement with an animalistic snort, then laughed again. Malik smiled at his captive. We will salvage this yet, it seems. Then you will be on your way to a long overdue audience with the Primus. They'll not let you out of Partha, cleric, Old Dyson snarled. The townsfolk love Master Ethon. They'll stop you. They'll tell you you're apart for what you've done. But why should they stop me? Asked the malevolent figure, putting his monstrous palm to his face. As Old Dyson watched, stunned, the flesh moved to cover the revealed areas. In seconds, Malik once more completely resembled the merchant, even to the difference in height. The spell that allowed him to walk in Ethon's flesh was an astonishing, if grisly, creation. Why should they stop their dearly beloved leader? Indeed, there was no reason, and Old Dyson now saw that. The guards and any bystanders would be fooled just as he had been, especially in the dark. She must be with one of the others, Malik went on, turning back to the question of Lila. Perhaps she is already seducing one of them to take your place. The high priest could not have said more terrible words in front of Old Dyson. His blood boiled and the mindless rage swept over him. He shoved back in an attempt to free himself from his guard's grips, but instead of the few steps during which he had hoped his captor's feet would trip, Old Dyson and the two Morlu flew across the study. And through the window. Debris rained down on Dyson as he and the Morlu fell. Despite their predicament, the bestial warriors clung to him as if their lives depended upon doing so. Old Dyson, in turn, tried to fold himself up as much as possible, aware that the ground was not at all that far. They collided with a thud and a rush of dirt. The crack of bone echoed in Old Dyson's ear. One of the Morlu let out a rasping cry, and his fingers slipped from the captive's arm. Old Dyson immediately tried to pull free of the other warrior, but the Morlu held fast. As the two rolled over, they came face to face. The night shadowed the Morlu's countenance much, but not enough at such close range to prevent the son of the Medes from seeing the black pits where the eyes should have been. A fist in the Morlu's chin did nothing. Old Dyson grabbed for the throat just as his foe did the same. The warrior's fingers all but threatened to crush his windpipe, yet for some reason the Morlu held back. It took Old Dyson several precious seconds to understand why. They still wanted him alive after all this. Why else try to take him in secret? However, while that gave him some hope, he could not completely discount the Morlu for getting orders and finally simply killing the man with whom he struggled. What stared at him from within the unsettling ram skull helmet was not human, not anymore. At any moment his foe might become lost in bloodlust. With all his will, Dyson attempted to summon the same strength that he had thrown him and his two bulky adversaries so far away. Gritting his teeth, the farmer swung at his foe again, this time aiming at the only target, the heavily armored chest. The Morlu blocked his wrist, slowing the strike. Old Dyson's fist split open. His palm slapped lightly against the breastplate, hardly enough to do any damage. The Morlu went sinking into the ground as if a huge invisible hammer had struck him. He sank so deep that there was not even a trace of him to see. Another hand seized hold of as Old Dyson sought to recover. Shouts erupted from elsewhere, likely Master Ethon's guards coming to protect their employer and his property. Old Dyson wanted to warn them of Malik's horrific masquerade, but the remaining Morlu, having recovered from the fall, now fell upon him in earnest. Perhaps recovered was not quite the correct word, for as the warrior spun old Dyson to face him, the son of Demeets found himself staring at a head bent completely to the right. A good portion of the Morlu's neck stuck out in an obscene and impossible manner, yet none of this appeared to matter to the furious creature. Once again, fingers clamped around old Dyson's throat. The Morlu squeezed, but not enough to kill. Old Dyson's air was cut off. He knew that his foe had to do was wait for him to pass out. Then Malik would have his prey, and no one would be able to save Lila. Reaching up, old Dyson grabbed hold of one side of the Morlu's head. Gritting his teeth, he pulled as hard as he could. With a horrible sucking sound, the head came free. The Morlu's body shivered, and the fingers released. They grasped blindly for the head, which old Dyson pulled back. Like something out of a ghastly puppet show, old Dyson led the torso several steps toward the wall surrounding Master Ethan's estate. Then, with as much strength as he could muster, he threw the head over. The torso lunged only to collide with the wall as it repeated the attempt, but the same results. Only its third try the headless body stumbled, then slid to the ground where it at last stilled. Exhaling, old Dyson quickly looked back at the house. There was no sign of any activity in the study, but around the grounds guards scurried. Two of them closed on old Dyson. The moment that they recognized him, the pair slowed. He gestured at the house. "Inside! There's more inside! Beware! You must cut off their heads!" They looked at him with somewhat fearful expressions. Old Dyson did not care if they believed him. He ran past, already fearful that Malik had located Lila, or any of the others for that matter. Bursting through the front doors, he stumbled over something in the dark. Twisting around on the floor, old Dyson discovered, to his horror, a corpse that surely had once belonged to one of the merchant's household servants. Once again, the contents of old Dyson's stomach threatened to come up, for the body had completely and perfectly flayed. First Ethan and his son, now this poor soul. Old Dyson was caught between revulsion and bitterness. Each of the horrible demises could be tied to him. Yet old Dyson was not foolish enough to blame himself alone. Yet Malik was the culprit who had done the foul work. Malik at the bidding of the Primus. Anger again overwhelmed him. There was nothing that old Dyson could do about the mysterious Lucian, but he could try to see about making certain that the high priest troubled him no more, even as he had to sacrifice himself to the process. The guards he had spoken to stopped at the entrance, the torch in the hand of one illuminating the grisly scene for them. They stared round-eyed at old Dyson. "Beware anyone in the house bearing a weapon, or anyone with the semblance of your master and his son, if they are truly Ethan and young Cedric." He had to choke back the emotions swelling up, or else the guards would suspect the truth. Then they will understand that you're locking them away for their own safety. "Lock them away?" blurted one man in surprise. "For their own sake, and yours, trust me." If old Dyson had been any other person, the men likely would have rejected his commands, but they knew of his miracles. Old Dyson cursed silently, wishing that more than a handful of people had exhibited some abilities akin to his own. At the moment, he would have been happy with Romus or Jonas at his side, or Achilleos. The archer was his only hope. Achilleos had nearly slain Malik once and could have killed one of the Morlu if it were how. As the guards sought to catch their wits, old Dyson raced up the steps to the next floor. Already he pictured Lila lying dead in the corridor, and the fear of that coming true urged him on despite his injuries and exertion. The room he shared with her lay directly ahead. Mustering his strength, old Dyson threw himself out the door. With a crash it fell open. Old Dyson immediately rolled to his feet, ready to face 100 Maleks. But the sinister cleric was not there, and neither was Lila. Instead, a frightened young woman huddled in the far corner. Old Dyson reckoned her as one of the women Master Ethon had commanded to see to the noble woman's needs while she was his guest. "Where is she?" he roared, ignoring her fear. "Where is Lila?" The woman wordlessly pointed at a huge oak clothing cabinet. In addition to what she had been wearing on her arrival, she now had other garments procured for her by their host. The same went on for all of Master Ethon's guests. The man had shown nothing but courtesy and care, and what had happened to him was a true nightmare that old Dyson would never forget. And worse, he now feared that it had also happened to the woman he loved. Why else would the servant point at the shut cabin and shiver with such horror? Then something struck a chord. A servant. A household servant. Old Dyson recalled the false clerk and how, despite his diminutive appearance, some spell surely hid from sight another monstrous Morlu or the like. Could it be? He whirled around, almost too late. It leapt across the bed at him, a thing swollen beyond proportions of the skin it wore. Rips and tears spread through the fragile flesh, and beneath it could seen the armor. The face was a contorted mask no longer fitting the event as a horrific figure fell upon him. Old Dyson could not help but again marvel at how Malek's spellwork made size and shape of no consequence to the guise. The two crashed into the cabinet, reducing it to splinters, scraps of stolen skin dropping from his ghoulish countenance. The Morlu raised his hand, a hand in which he now wielded a savage, curved axe. With a grating laugh, it brought it down upon old Dyson.